I got a call and they said, can you come to a meeting? We got to talk about the Voight-Kampff machine. And I said, what's the Voight-Kampff machine? Because I just started. I didn't know what's going on. So it turned out that it's a very important prop in the movie, and Ridley had seen what these guys did and just lost it and said, this is just crap. I'm not going to put it in a movie. It was, I don't want to get into the details because it isn't important, but it was truly embarrassing. It was, if any of you have a 6-year-old child, they could have done as well, and I'm not exaggerating. So they said, what do we do? And I said, well, let me make a phone call. And I called Mark Stetson, who's a good friend of mine, and tomorrow morning, I want to forewall you until Tuesday morning to get this thing built. I brought him the Sid Mead sketches, left all the other art director-driven stuff, and brought the terrible prop. And the miniature builders were, as I expected, when they saw the terrible prop, completely energized. It was like, oh my God, that's terrible. We can do so much better. And they did. They're just spectacular. The last two people standing were me and Mark, because you always wind up with the guys who are going to get their heads cut off if it doesn't work, lasting the longest. And I loaded it in the trunk of my car at about 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning and drove to the set, plugged it in, showed it to Ridley, and he said, fucking fantastic. And that was it, and we were off and running.
This podcast is brought to you by Befores and Afters magazine. Befores and Afters magazine is the monthly print mag from VFX journalist Ian Fales. Go in-depth on key visual effects topics with major VFX supervisors, artists and studios. Each issue covers a different area like creature animation, miniatures, on-set VFX and VFX tools. Find your copy at beforesandafters.com/magazine.
This podcast is also brought to you by Hugo's Desk new compositing course. Join today to have access to 150 pre-recorded classes, 50 hours of training, using real production assets covering industry standard techniques with over 200 gigs of showreel material and access to a private Discord channel with over 2,300 students. This course is endorsed by Foundry and has access to a Foundry student license paid separately. Join today at hugosdesk.myshopify.com. And now on to the show.
Hi everyone, welcome to the VFX Notes Podcast. I'm Ian Fales and this is Hugo Guerra. Hi Hugo, how are you?
Hey Ian, how you doing? How's it going?
Really good. We have a super special episode today, which is a flashback to FMX, and I'm so excited to showcase what we did there with Mike Fink, Hugo. But first, we always want to thank our viewers, our sponsors, our subscribers, and our Patreon members. We wouldn't be able to do this show without them, would we?
No, absolutely no. It's we can't thank all of you enough. Everyone that supports the show over these last 3 years. As you know, we've done now 3 years of this podcast, and yeah, it's wonderful. It's wonderful to have all this support, and especially all the lovely comments we always get on all the videos, and also the private messages we get sometimes. It's great. Keep them coming, and yeah, thanks everyone.
Keep them coming. We've got some pretty fun episodes coming soon. One of our recent ones was on my favorite film, Speed. So make sure you check that one out. I really have to thank Hugo for allowing us to do Speed, which was actually for our 3rd anniversary episode. Super cool. So cool. Okay, FMX, Hugo. This is the Film and Media Exchange conference in Stuttgart, which I've been to now since 2009, I think it is. A long time. This conference has been going a long time.
Yeah.
Do you remember your first FMX that you went to?
Yeah, I do. I first time I went, it was with the mill. I was still at the mill, and we went over to do a recruitment talk about the mill, try to recruit some people. And I was on the stand of the recruitment, checking some showreels. This was 2011. That was the first time I ever came over to the festival. Didn't do a presentation on that year. I just, technically I did because I was on the recruitment presentation. And then I checked all the showreels. But then, ever since then, I've been there every year, and usually always with a presentation, sometimes with multiple presentations. I think most of the time, most of the years I have 2, 3, 4. I've had one year that I had 5 presentations. So it's been a customary thing to be there every year, except the COVID year. I think we all, none of us went there on that year, but it's great. I love FMX. I keep saying this to everyone, and I'm not lying when I say that it's by far my favorite festival of the year. I just love it. I love the environment and the atmosphere and the organization of it as well. I can't thank enough all the love and support they give us as well. But it's just a fantastic It's a fantastic festival.
Yeah. What seems to work so well about FMX is you could come and just spend time watching all the presentations on the latest films, TV shows, games, immersive stuff. Or you could actually come to Stuttgart and just hang out with the industry.
Yeah.
Or if you're a student, you could just go and visit the recruitment booths and other presentations. Like, I barely get to see everything, and that's what probably makes the conference so good, is there's so much going on, it's super well organized, really slick, and we have a good week there.
Shout out to Patricia, to Vanessa, to Mario. Like they are amazing at putting this together. I know there's a lot more people, but I can't name them all, of course, in here. But it's funny what you just said. Like there is like a different, like there's a lot of worlds of FMX. Like you said, the students one, and there's the talking with the industry, but then there's also the piano bar as well. There's a lot of people that just stay on the piano bar and get drunk, I guess, and have meetings there. So it's also like since it's in the center of Europe, it is, for me at least, every year, it is as an industry veteran, it's a fantastic place to meet people that you haven't talked in a long time, because not only the whole Europe comes together, but also a lot of people from the States come over. So sometimes it's the only time of the year that I even meet in person some of these friends that I've had over the years. It's like I just get to hang out with all the people that I've met over the years in the industry. I'm sure it's the same for you. Like, it's also your opportunity to actually get to meet in person with all the people you interview all over the year, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes being in Australia feels a long way from the industry. So absolutely something like FMX or SIGGRAPH or the View Conference is all about catching up with people face to face. And I mean, I actually think because of COVID and then because of work from home, like when we all get together, people are so excited to see others. Even if they've been working in a studio since COVID, they're often working from home and they're sometimes feeling a little bit isolated. So getting out of the office and having a beer and, hanging out is a big deal for everyone at FMX. You could really feel that vibe there. I certainly did this year.
I really recommend everyone, if you haven't gone to FMX, at least go at least once in your lifetime, because it is a completely, it's a one in a lifetime experience of going there and meeting up with everyone and going through all the events and the barrage of presentations as well. I just feel like everyone should go there at least once, or more. I guess we've been going for much longer.
Now, at FMX for the past few years, I've been running a track called Then and Now.
Yeah.
And the whole point of Then and Now is a bit of a thing to tap into my fascination with retro VFX content, which is looking at old school things, but also how it can translate to new things in VFX and animation. And what we're going to be playing for you today is actually the whole presentation we did with Senior Visual Effects Supervisor Mike Fink, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But my track also included sessions on side effects with Mark Alent. That was really, really cool. We also had Todd Sheridan Perry do something on I'm a Virgo, which is that great Boots Riley show where he even did a demo of Forced Perspective. And so I really enjoyed the fact that he could do that. And so those were some of my highlights from things that I produced there, Hugo. But I wanted to just hear from you about what you might have seen at FMX that you really enjoyed, apart from what you and I did together.
Yeah, of course. Mike's talk that you're going to watch in a few minutes was the highlight of the show for sure. But I also really enjoyed my presentation as well. I had like a state of the industry presentation, like a state of the industry panel, which was quite heated up. It was like really had a, because the industry is in a flux right now, and it's like there's a lot of people without no work, and there's a lot of like problematic things going on with AI, and a lot of problems going on right now with unions, and so it was a really hot debate. It was warm in the room, and it was hot in the discussion as well, and it was, as usual, like a fantastic discussion. I wish we had more time. The only thing I regret is that we only had 1 hour. So I did that. I also did a presentation with the Foundry Educational Hour. Me and Victor Perez were there as well, talking with some people and getting together with some of our followers there as well. But yeah, I saw so much stuff, man. I of course the highlights were your presentations. I thought Todd's live workshop was just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, that was cool.
I haven't seen anything like that. I really wish we did. When I was on like watching the thing with you and Todd about my I Am Virgo, I was just like, my mind exploded. Like, wow, why don't we do this more often? Why don't we do live things like this? We could do it with green screens. We could do it with cameras. We could do it with lenses.
We should.
We can interview with the people can come over to the stage. It was just brilliant. I'll put I have some photos, and Ian has some photos as well. I'll put some photos while we're talking right now. But Todd did an amazing job on trying to show how he does force perspective using his phone. He just had his iPhone, trying to showcase people that they can use any equipment whatsoever, and it's really agnostic, this kind of technique. And it's really old school, and it always really harkens back to his amazing presentation before as well, where before his workshop, he also did this wonderful keynote about the history of force perspective and the history of these old techniques, and also, of course, from I Am Virgo. Yeah, Todd's presentation was just outstanding. I really loved it, and I thought it was a breath of fresh air. And congratulations, Ian, because it opened up a whole can of worms now. Like, I feel like we should, and everyone should try to have presentations like this in the future, because it's so engaging,
Yeah, that worked out really well. It was quite simple what Todd did, as you say, just with an iPhone, but the audience, they clapped when it worked. That was
fun. They were so happy.
Yeah. I'll highlight one other presentation I thought was probably one of the best of the week, which was on Fallout.
Yeah.
And that's because Fallout had just finished, I think, the first series. And the whole team was there. Jay Worth, the overall VFX Soup, Andrea, the VFX producer, and Andreas from Rise VFX. And they did this quite long deep dive into the work that both showcased, filming, virtual production, LED wall work, creatures, and then they had a long Q&A. And I was really lucky to be asked to moderate the Q&A, so it was fun to be there. But I thought their Fallout one was pretty much a highlight of the week in terms of the big shows or films to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure we're gonna cover the film in some way in our podcast as well, because such a big show. And
I love how you called it the film, because it is a great series.
So
it feels like a film.
Yes,
it feels
does.
like a film. Yeah.
I was just gonna mention that it's one of that by far one of my favorite game series, and I've played all of the games. And there's a lot of them, and I've been playing them for over 20 years, almost 20 years now, and they are really good. I don't think the show is as good as the games, but will talk about that on the show. But
otherwise, this is the Fallout episode.
Exactly. I'll give you another highlight. I have quite a few highlights here that I would like to just mention really quickly, but a big Fallout and a big shout out would be for Jonas. Jonas from the Rabbit Hole YouTube channel. He did an amazing. He premiered the last episode of his series. No CGI is really invisible CGI. And it was amazing to see his last episode. It was really funny to watch the last episode. This was a presentation in part organized by the Visual Effects Society. If anything, I wish that it had a longer Q&A, and I wish that they had more questions and more time for that. I felt like we should have been longer in that room, or maybe we should have seen a shorter version of the episode, or maybe not have the intro from the Visual Effects Society, maybe dedicate more time to the questions, because you were there, man, and the room was really, really eager to talk about this.
The room, yes.
It was exploding.
Partly because of the chaos that VFX is in at the moment, but also Jonas's videos have just set the world on fire.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so to get the exclusive first viewing of it, that was pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, and
That
people
was
were
pretty cool.
really, really engaged. I don't think I've ever been a presentation that I had so many stage. I don't think I've ever seen a presentation on any festival, and I've been on a lot of festivals, where you had so much input from the audience. Like, there was even people on the audience shouting and talking and not even waiting for the mic and just going for it. It was almost like a town hall, and it was fantastic. I thought it was fantastic, and shout out to Jonas. I think he did an amazing job there, and I hope he continues to do more videos, of course. But yeah, I thought that was brilliant, definitely. And I think also because it was the first day, it was quite hotted as well because of that. But yeah, what about you?
Well, another thing that works really well at the conference is simply interest areas. So you can spend time just going to like Digital Humans, and that's run by Mike Seymour, and that was really fantastic. Or you can just talk about or watch AI presentations or things on real time. I actually thought AI would be a bigger topic at the conference.
Yeah.
And I think it there was definitely lots of great presentations about it, but you're really getting to that point, Hugo, don't you think, where a lot of VFX artists were against AI, even though there's lots of evangelists in the world and in VFX talking about it and how it can be used really well. I didn't think there was as much debate about AI as I thought there would be, but it's always nice to have those presentations there. Some of them also, what worked well was that some of them were more academic in nature.
Yeah.
And so they weren't just some studio promoting their wares. But, usually at FMX, there's some new topic that gets talked about a lot. And for a couple of years there, it was all about Unreal Engine and real time and virtual production.
Yeah.
And AI is
I think it was like
obviously
3 years in a row with that. I think it was like a lot of time.
Yeah. AI is a hot button issue at the moment, but in some ways it was kind of more overshadowed by general industry discussion.
Yeah.
Because of the state of the industry.
Yeah. I completely agree with you. And I feel like AI right now is a really toxic word, and no wonder why Apple rebranded it as Apple Intelligent. They didn't even call it AI.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a toxic word, and every single company in the world is using some form of machine learning, mostly machine learning. Not really a lot of AI, but mostly machine learning. Every company in the world is using it. Some companies are using their own models in AI and their own ethical models in-house. I don't think a lot of people want to talk about it. I think that's happening a lot. Like, I've talked with a lot of studios and a lot of people at work that telling me, yeah, we're using it, but we don't really say that we're using it. Like, because they're afraid of the downfall, and they're afraid of the clients, and they're trying to rebrand it a bit and say machine learning, machine this, and they're trying to it's tricky.
Yeah, my counterpoint to that is that they do want to talk about it. Sometimes they're blocked by a film studio who realizes that it's a little bit toxic, especially with the actors' strike.
Yeah.
And then the third thing that happens sometimes, and this used to happen a lot when, say, the late 90s or when a new technology was invented or being used, some visual effects studios are being very secretive about it.
Yeah.
So they don't want to reveal what they're doing, how they're doing it, because they see it as their secret sauce, and it's getting them work, and they don't want to share too much about it, which is totally legit and fair enough. But it's interesting because it doesn't actually result in much conversation about this new technology. Yeah. So,
especially because some of these studios are actually legitimately doing really amazing work with it, and very ethical work with it. It's just that it's a shame that they're not being allowed to talk about it, or even having like the relaxation of actually discussing it. And I think in a few years from now, we're going to look back and discover quite a lot of things that were made with machine learning and AI that we didn't thought about it at the time or didn't knew about it. And I do think, like all fads, I think this is really a major fad, and there's a lot of like really toxicity about it, and eventually it's not going to go anywhere. So I feel like this will eventually tone down and become normal and just another tool that we have. But it's going to take a while until it kind of becomes normal, and it's especially going to take a while until the legal aspect of it is solved and more sorted out than it is right now. So I can't wait to see what happens. But yes, you're absolutely right. I know what you mean. Like I was also expecting a lot more about it, and it didn't really happen on the show,
Oh, I have one more huge highlight. It's more of a personal one, Hugo. And that was a few of us got to go and visit the world's biggest IMAX screen, which is in a town not far from Stuttgart. And we got like a behind-the-scenes tour of the screen of the cinema, and they showed us clips from June 2 and other films. It was incredible. And I learnt a lot about IMAX that I didn't already know, including the way they shake the screen to avoid this laser projection speckle problem that sometimes happens. And also about literally ratios, because it's not actually a square screen or an IMAX-sized screen. It's bigger than that. And I was curious about that. But that was super cool, and I really hope we get to go back to IMAX for other FMXs. So yeah, they're my highlights.
Yeah, I didn't get to go to that one because I had a presentation at the same time. I was really, really bummed out about that. No, I mean, there was a lot of things, really cool things. Like, I felt like we saw, of course, there was a lot more. I was really, really impressed by Vetta's talk about water and about especially what they showed on Ripley, because at the time when they were showing it there was nothing out on Ripley. So this was the first time ever that we ever saw anything. In fact, I've just finished watching Ripley with Anna, and we were blown away by the show, and I had no idea what was going on. And now we know. Now, of course, there's been out like a behind the scenes from Netflix, and there's like a lot of conversation now. But I thought that was also a fantastic presentation. Very well introduced as well, very well talked, and not very technical, which was amazing. It was very, very open to everyone. But yeah, it was just so much good stuff. We had, the Wonka's presentation was fantastic as well. The Poor Things presentation was fantastic as well. I mean, I just felt that it was a great year. It was a great year to watch, and there was even bigger. There was the Creator presentation as well, of course. But just trying to talk about the smaller ones that I watch. I thought it was terrific, and yeah, we got to hang out as well. It was great.
We did, and we hung out on stage, of course, because what Hugo and I did, we're finally getting to talk about Mike Fink now, is a very special live episode of VFX Notes for people who were in the room. And what that meant was we were on stage, our guest Mike Fink was on stage, and then the audience watched us talk to Mike alongside, as you'll see, images and video, and then got to ask him a few questions as well, which was the whole intention of a live edition of VFX Notes. And now FMX has generously given us that video to play as our own VFX Notes episode. But it was super fun, wasn't it, Hugo? The whole hanging out with Mike during the week, but also actually doing that session.
It was amazing. I was really, really blown away by his kindness and his humility. And like, we had dinner with him almost every night, and it was just amazing to hang out with him and to see his life story and to see all the stories, the fantastic stories he has. He has a lot of them.
Well, when you get to work on Mars Attacks, X-Men films, Golden Compass, Batman films, the Penguins from Coca-Cola, and like all these other films, including Blade Runner, where he was more like a props person. Yeah, that was fascinating too.
It was amazing, and I really enjoyed being on stage, especially because we had, you should all go in and make sure you check it until the end, because there's a lot of questions from the audience at the end as well, which was, I think, one of my favorite things, to have actually audience interaction, which we've never had before, which was fantastic. And I can't wait to do this again. I hope we have the chance to do this again. But for me, it was an honor to be next to Mike on the stage, because he's really responsible for a lot of the things that I started in the industry because of the work that he's done. I have to say that X-Men 2 and, The Golden Compass and Batman Returns, all those films really cemented my love for VFX at a very young age. And it was incredibly touching for me to meet him in person and to actually get to talk with him every night and every day, and on the show as well with him about all these wonderful films he's did. He's a very special guy, and he's a treasure, he's a real treasure. And I hope he does that book that he says he doesn't want to do, because he has a lot of stories. He's a storyteller, he's a storyteller, and that's amazing on this industry, because he knows how to tell a story, and he has so much details on it, and he's just a giant in this industry. I really loved it.
Yeah. And of course, fitting in with that then and now theme, one of the most interesting things about Mike is him traversing both the analog optical eras of visual effects through to digital, and being a key part of that transition. We're not that many supervisors are still in that position.
No.
So, and still able to talk about it as candidly as he can. That was really cool too. And just to get those old school perspectives along with, the new ones as well, I thought was really great.
Yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. Yeah.
All right. Well, shall we cross to it now, Hugo? And thank you again, FMX, for allowing us to show this video. Thank you, Hugo, for the chat on the day, and thanks to Mike Fink for being part of our presentation. Super cool.
Yeah, enjoy the presentation, everyone, and leave some nice comments as well.
Enjoy. Bye.
Bye.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to this special live VFX Notes episode. I'm Ian Fales from Befores and Afters, and this is Hugo Guerra from Hugo's Desk. Hopefully you might recognize us from the VFX Notes Podcast. You're in for a very special treat this afternoon because we have a VFX Oscar winner here. Could you please welcome Mike Fink? Pretty cool to have Mike Fink here with us. Hey, Hugo.
Yeah, it's amazing to be here and to be doing it live with the live audience as well, which is the first time ever. So, yeah. And thank you so much for taking the time to come and meet us and take the invitation,
You're welcome. Thank you, and don't believe a word I say.
We're going to have a bit of fun running through Mike's career. He'll talk about many of the films he's worked on, and you'll see them soon in a reel. So I won't even go through your history, Mike, because we're basically going to be talking about that the whole time. Importantly, we're going to leave lots of time for questions, and we'd really like you to ask Mike about your favourite film that he worked on. You could even ask Hugo and I a question if you're dying to scrape the barrel for anything like that. We're going to have some giveaways. So the first 4 people to ask a question, the first person is going to get a free course from Hugo's Desk, which I think is a pretty good prize. And then the next 3 questions get a copy of my print magazine, Befores and Afters. So please get your hands ready at the end of our talk, and they'll be the giveaways. But I think we're going to run the slideshow and just jump straight into it. Mike, you've worked for a long time in visual effects, but actually you got your start in more prop building, right, and art direction.
This is China Syndrome up here, right? Yeah, okay. Yeah. That's the first film I worked on. And this is just progressing through a bunch of stuff that I've, touched. It's not if I made a reel of everything I've worked on, you'd be here for hours and I'd never get to say a word. So, so it's just the things that meant a lot to me in terms of both my career progression and just personally. That's War Games. That's the first time I got a visual effects supervisor credit. 1983, 82. Buckaroo Banzai. I designed the flux capacitor for.
Woo!
And this is some of the miniature stuff from Batman Returns.
You nominated for an Oscar for that film?
Yeah, right. Nominated for an Oscar for that. And that over the shoulders, all in camera. It's not, there's no composite. These are CG penguins, CG bats.
Let's talk about some of the early work first, though. Hugo, we were fascinated with the Blade Runner stuff, right? Yeah. The vid phone. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, the vid phone initially on Blade Runner was just a background prop, and I worked primarily as an art director on the film, but couldn't be credited as an art director because I wasn't in the union and for that. So they called me on the credit list an action prop supervisor. And basically what I did is I did all the what I call the techno props for the film, the small stuff that people generally see interacting with the actors or whatever. There were 4 vid phones that were just populated into the scenes. They did not work. They did not light up. You never saw anything happen. Right at the end of principal photography, as I remember it toward the end, this was the first image-based lighting shot that I did, I think.
We're way too distracted by the...
So, yeah, I kept being distracted by my own work. That's pretty weird. And so, anyway, no, I lost my track. See, that's a terrible thing.
They didn't work.
Right, they didn't work. And so I got a call from one of the producers saying, and all my crew had been laid off. I was the last one left. And they said, Mike, we need a working vid phone on the set. And I said, when? Because usually I got a call like that. It meant like in an hour. And in this case, I had a day or two. And so I did it myself and built this working vid phone where Harrison could walk in, put in a card, a fake little vid phone card. There were these little credit card looking things, but I don't think you actually see that in the film. And put it in a slot, it sucks it in, the clock starts to run, the screen lights up, and the video starts. And we had a scene, which we didn't know about until I got that phone call, where Harrison was talking to Sean Young, Rachel in the film, and Sean really felt more. Sean was not, at that point, not an actress, really. She was a fashion model, and she became an actress on that film. And she wanted to be able to read lines with Harrison like she would if they were together. And so we set up a real live 24 frame per second video feed, and I remodeled the video so that it refreshed at 48 hertz and not 60 hertz, so that the video would be in sync with the taking camera. And we put Sean about 6 or 8 feet away, off to the side, and pointed a camera at her that was a 24 frame video camera. And then that live video got fed to the screen, and the two of them could have their dialogue scene on the vid phone, and it was not to tape, and they weren't stuck with a performance maybe they didn't want, and then they'd have to go back and post and replace it, and that'd be not easy back in those days.
No, and you did it overnight, essentially.
Just about overnight, yeah. I was pretty good back then. I can't do that now. It's more like I refuse to do that.
There's the scene now on the screen, I think.
Yeah, that's it right there, yeah. So...
I think we have an image of the phone. I just scribbled.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm just scribbling.
Now getting a super preview of all the slides.
I'm gonna go back. Okay, too much. Not
I actually owned the phone until just a few years ago. And
what happened to it?
It went off to auction land. Yeah, it did. Yeah.
And the screen was a repurposed CR3, wasn't it? Like one of these
was a
broadcast Sony CRTs.
It was a Sony broadcast television.
Yeah.
So it was RF video. It was like
not-
the worst quality you could imagine.
It's not futuristic at all for a futuristic film like Blade Runner, like using like old CRT technology.
In the States, the video standard is called NTSC, and what that means is never the same color. So anyway, that was that. It was kind of quick, and then of course I was dismantling the shop. There was nobody there but me and a couple of laborers, and I said, well, we're going to toss this thing. I'll just put it in the trunk of my car. But I wound up having to get rid of it because I couldn't maintain it. And, it's a prop. They're designed to last a few weeks to a few months. They're not designed to last decades. And it was crumbling. It was decaying. And it was going to continue to decay because I didn't have time to, care for it. And I had more stuff like that. And so I just got rid of it all.
Well, we're going to race through this presentation a little bit because we do want to open it up to questions sooner than we normally would. So we're going to jump to Batman Returns, 1992 film. That really, Mike, was kind of this period where things were still analog, even optical compositing, but we had moved a lot into digital and CG. It's sort of right on the cusp, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was the film when we started. My guess was we started pre-production in 1990, and my guess was that we would have maybe 20% of the shots have some digital component. By the time we finished, it got closer to, I think, 80% or something like that. It was pretty crazy. Like these shots were supposed to be in camera. That other angle that you just saw that Hugo just showed, that one there is actually sort of a background making of picture where you can see the Ice Queen in the rig, and there's a camera directly over her, lost in shadow there in the top left corner. and she's on a crane, and the crane arm is being dropped down over the miniature, and then we blew her hair with an air mover, so it was wildly blowing, and we rehearsed her to work at half speed. And we shot her at half speed, 12 frames per second. And then when played back at 24 frames, her motion looked normal in terms of speed, but her hair was wildly going crazy and had the right effect. And we used it with her, and we used the same effect with Michelle Pfeiffer when she's falling through those canopies. And it worked. And then I used it with Michael Keaton on a shot where we actually didn't have enough light, and to make it work, it was the first unit shot, and we couldn't get it the stop we needed. So we ran the camera at 12 frames per second, and I asked Michael to work half speed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it worked fine. But he was not as good a half speed actor as Michelle. She was better.
You heard that first. Michelle Pfeiffer can act at half speed.
That shot, that over the shoulder is Batman's double, Michael Keaton's double. One of them, obviously you can put just about anybody in there and make it a double. And standing on a scissor lift, and his feet are about 12 feet above the ground plane of the Gotham Plaza down there. All those little people were actually animated. They were some on bent wires, and some could be slid a little bit. And so the crowd actually moved, all in camera. And then another cut as a POV, we put bats in it when the bats got released by Penguin and flooded the Gotham Plaza.
I mean, that's what Hugo and I were fascinated about when we were revisiting this film, right? I had forgotten how much digital CG simulation you'd done in 1992. Just remember, this is before Jurassic Park. Obviously, things like The Abyss and Terminator 2 had been made. But as you'll see in this reel, there's a really great mix here of practical penguins and effects, but also later some digital ones.
Yeah, I mean the penguins. If you look at them in the film today, you go get yourself a Blu-ray or whatever, and look at it. They don't look very good, to be honest. Lighting back then was really a struggle, and we were trying to make. These are live penguins, and so we had a mix of live and digital penguins, and we had to make them animate and move like real penguins. But you can see in that there's one cut on a crowd of penguins there, and they're in the background. They're digital penguins, and the lighting's terrible.
They don't get really controlled.
That's Jim Riegel up on the top right, and then a whole bunch of other people working on the penguins. And the penguins actually got pretty good, but they would never hold up in close-up because we just didn't have enough detail in them. And we literally were measuring the render time per frame to get it done before the film had to hit the theaters. So it was a real... I had SGI machines all over LA poised to jump in and render frames, if we hit, because we had no idea if we were to get it done.
I remember seeing this breakdown in the original making ofs, Hugo, but I wonder whether things like this inspired you to get into the industry a little bit, seeing SGI machines and wireframes and Matador or Softimage. I just was so excited to see that behind the scenes back.
It definitely inspired me a lot to go into the industry for sure. I mean, I just recently got a Silicon Graphics in my office. You saw it just the other day. I just got a loan from a friend of mine, and I'm going to poke around with it. A little bit, yeah.
Which one?
It's the O2. It's not. It's a bit recent, but yeah.
It's like a little baby, but like a baby toaster.
Well, that's because you're taking a photo next to it and caressing it the other day.
I have a friend who was incredibly valuable to us on another Batman movie, which I didn't supervise, which was Batman and Robin, I think.
Amazing movie.
Yeah, and. It was at a facility that I was.
No one laughed.
I was
okay.
running, but there was a fellow there who worked there. He was a brilliant guy. His name's Joel Merritt, and he's still around, still working. And Joel was working with us on all the photogrammetry stuff to freeze the people.
Oh yeah,
which nobody had done yet, and we had to do ice, digital ice, and things like that. I mean, in 1991, 92, just rendering one of those frames was, go out for dinner, maybe get a hotel room, come back the next day and see a frame in video res. That was the kind of.
But how were you, like you said that it was a mix of real penguins and digital penguins, because I guess the real ones didn't really operate on the push of a button. It probably was very hard to control them. How did you comp them in? Like at this time, it was very rudimentary compositing applications. What was the process there? Like, what software was it?
It was probably Composer, if Composer existed back then, I think.
Wavefront Composer, right?
But everybody was writing their own. So,
yeah, it would be, yeah.
So I honestly, not sure that it was anybody but whatever Boss Film wrote. To composite that. The bats were done by Richard Hollander at Video Image. Yeah, and there she is at half speed.
Worked just fine.
And that's so nice. I haven't seen that. That's pretty cool. Wow, who did that? That's good. So anyway, it was fun because the film was quite challenging. Tim was convinced he was going to use real bats.
Of course he was.
And of course, by the way, the set, this set is on stage 16 at Warner Brothers, which is 65 feet high to the permanence. So it's about actually 80 feet to the ceiling. It's large, very large. And he wanted to see breath. He wanted all this snowy, icy stuff, and he wanted to see breath in the actors. So the studio paid for refrigerating these immense volumes.
No.
Yes. And we shot in the summer in LA. And so it'd be 90, 100 degrees outside. You'd walk inside and you needed a down parka. and you walk around, and everybody was sick,
It's like a meat freezer.
and you could barely see the breath. It had to be backlit in every shot, and of course, not every shot's going to be backlit. So it was one of those. It was, great fun, but
We're going to move on to the next film to talk about, and it's Mars Attacks. That's you on set, again with Tim Burton. What was that film like to work on, Mike?
Well, it was wonderful. First of all, we were all convinced, all of us who were deeply enmeshed in the film, that it was going to be the massive hit and that everybody was going to go see it. First of all, the cast, it just never ended, these massive names that were up there. So we were all excited, and it was so wacky. It just was so much fun, and we would laugh on the set, and we had a lot of fun, and the actors were fantastic, and there were no issues, and Tim is great. He's just great. So we were out in the desert, as you can tell, it kind of looks like that. And I'm describing with Tim, we're talking about, I had to shoot some aerial stuff above. We had to turn 700 people into 700,000 people. And trying to render 700,000 people is not easy when you're doing it the way we had to do it back then. And so it was an issue which I hadn't solved yet. We hadn't figured out exactly how we were going to pull it off. And but we did it. And but I was describing where, he was telling me where he wanted the helicopter to be and what the review needed to be. And we had some storyboards and things. That's what that conversation was.
It's a big ILM show, Mars Attacks, but the newly founded Warner Digital was obviously part of this film, and that's where you worked. Yeah. The next slide is a maquette of that amazing giant Martian robot thing.
Yeah, that's one
I think
of the things.
Possibly one of yours you sold as well, Mike.
I sold my robot. Yeah. I got.
You should just given it to me instead.
Bit of a total loss of whatever empathy or something for my own self. I got rid of all this stuff. I'm actually pretty happy that I did, but
Hugo, it's really curious. There was that era where visual effects studios still made maquettes, sometimes for scanning, sometimes for reference. Do you remember seeing those again also on behind the scenes things and wanting to have them?
Well, yeah. I mean, Mars Attack was like a big film when I was growing up. And it had a lot of extras as well. And I actually really liked the film. I never really understood why the film didn't really make it a bigger splash, because it was quite revolutionary at the time with the amount of visual effects it had. I mean, it had full CG creatures inside these glass domes, and it was quite ahead of its time. It was a big inspiration.
Tim, who's originally an animator, had decided that the film was going to be stop motion animated with live action. And they were working, I wasn't involved at that time, and they were working with all of these techniques to combine the live action with the miniature and scaling camera moves and motion control so that you could match a moving camera on the miniature shot with this, with what's happening later in live action, and comp all those people in. And the big problem, which actually shut that whole part of the operation down, that was difficult enough, but the real difficulty was that the Martians had a helmet that was smaller. The aperture for the head was smaller than their head. So if you put the helmet on, it wouldn't have fit over their head unless they were like a soft-boiled egg or something in there. They squish their brain through there. So, and we couldn't find any Martians who would let us try it. So we just had to assume. So they couldn't do stop motion animation of the faces because they couldn't put the helmet on and off.
Yes. Right.
And then it was constantly getting marks and fingerprints and all that kind of stuff, the old King Kong problem. And so there were a lot of suggestions to do them in CG, the Martians, and Tim didn't want to do it. He didn't like computers. He didn't like it at all. He was very much into old school techniques. And when I interviewed with him for Batman Returns, I asked him what were the things about his first Batman movie that he liked the best. And what did he want to see different? And the first thing he said is, well, I'm kind of known for cheesy. And I'd kind of like it to not be cheesy. And it was really hard. He really kind of gravitates toward cheesiness. So there's some cheesy stuff in there.
But was he happy with it? I know it was a bit hard in the beginning, but was he in the end happy with the result? And it kind of turned him a bit to more CG, because he uses a lot of CG now. So he's
nothing but. I mean, mostly. No, he made the. What happened is we all did tests without telling him, and then showing it to him, and then he went, "Wow, this is cool." So ILM did tests with they used some plates from Jumanji, and they put some Martians in the plate with Jumanji.
I remember that.
Yeah, and showed it to Tim, and I secretly did bat tests with Richard Hollander, and we did bat tests, and then the penguins we knew it either had to be stop motion or it had to be CG, and there was no room in the schedule for stop motion for that sequences with that number of penguins. That's it. And it complicated so many shots. And so we decided to bite the bullet, and I said, well, I think it's time. Let's do CG penguins.
Yeah. I love the idea that there might be all these tests out there done by different VFX studios, Hugo, that no one's ever seen. That would be cool.
I know. I can be the one storing them all if they want to. We can open a museum with all that footage and all the... Yeah, unfortunately, I think a lot of it mostly is lost, I guess, because most of the original files, I guess there wasn't any idea of like backing it up for future archiving or anything like that. A lot of times computers go away and probably the files are inside of them, and that's it.
The tests exist in some warehouse, someplace in Glendale.
Yeah.
If it's Warner Brothers, I've been there. It's really frightening.
Let's jump forward again to X-Men.
But in fact, I was in search of some video stuff from when we were at Warner Digital. Oh, yeah. And then I was doing something with Warner Brothers, and they said, well, didn't you do some tests that were kind of like this? And I went, yeah, but they're somewhere in the archives. And they said, well, go over there and get it. Well, they don't keep a catalog, nothing. And I just rummaging through boxes of Warner Digital reels of film and videotapes, and I found it, but it took a couple of days.
Wow. We're going to keep racing through. Obviously, you're watching here the bamf'ing sequence with Nightcrawler from X-Men 2.
Yeah.
Mike, I'm not ashamed to say I think that's one of the greatest visual effects sequences in history.
Wow.
I seriously think that. Do people think that out there?
Anything?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think so. What the heck? No, the Bamf was interesting. The Bamf was in the comic books, but it's drawn like a comic, and comics had a different style back then. So a lot of it was influenced by my own feeling about the physics of what would happen if somebody went from being a corporeal object and in a room and then disappearing. They would create a vacuum, and that vacuum would then create turbulence in the air around it, and you'd see that. But it was going to happen in like 6 or 8 frames because they happen really fast. So you'd have to get your DVD player out and watch it frame by frame.
Which I did.
To see. So you can see that we did this little volumetric guy that was mapped with the same colors, all his clothes, his skin, his blue skin, and his coat and stuff. And then all of that was then segued to some fluid dynamics and some particles that created this wispier, thinner stuff that you see there. And, it worked pretty well. But the best part about it was that the first X-Men, there was no Nightcrawler character in the first X-Men, but there was this light effect that Magneto was creating and going to turn all these normal humans into mutants with this light effect, and it was about to engulf Manhattan. And we were designing it. and I had some on my laptop on the set, and I brought it to the set, and it just happened to be the day that the head of the studio, Tom Rothman, was there, and Lauren Schuler, the producer, and Dick Donner, he's also the producer, and then Brian Singer, the director, and I showed it to them, and they said, "Wow, that's great." And I said, "Well, we have a long way to go. It's not there yet. It really needs to get it needs a lot of sweetening." And they said, "No, it doesn't. It's perfect. Don't spend any more time. Just put them in the shots." I mean, they were so worried. We had a 16-week post on the first X-Men. And you don't do that with a movie of that scale. Just not a good idea, especially if you want to live very long. And so we started, I got to do the night, and what happened is we did it, and then we got into post on that first one, and Tom Rothman, in a screening, because he came to all our dailies finals for visual effects. It was like, really, the head of the studio is coming to our visual effects?
He was bored.
And because he came, about 20 other junior executives had to come, right? Because they could not be there if Tom was there. And so he'd come, and so he starts seeing the effect, and he says, "Mike, I think you need to do more work on it." And I had not really totally stopped work, but we had so much to do for that movie and so little time. And everybody was so overwhelmingly positive about this thing. And I went, okay, well, if it's working for him, then I guess that's okay, which is a mistake. I should have trusted my instincts. And so when we got to doing the BAMF, they would say to me, they'd catch me on the set, and Lauren would catch me or Brian or something. You say, "When are we going to see the BAMF?" Because they knew I was doing tests. I said, "Oh, 2 weeks." And if any of you have ever remodeled a house or done anything with a contractor and you say, "When are you going to be done?" They always say 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks later, you ask them again, they say 2 weeks. And you keep doing. Well, that's just what I did. I did it for 5 months. And so it took 5 months to come up with the look of the BAMF. And they didn't ask me to do more work on it in post. They thought it was pretty good. This shot's all motion control, and it's multiple layers of, it's all 72 frames per second. And it was multiple layers of stunt people, and, and of course there's no ceiling in the room because we had fly rigs for the stunt guy. There's no ceiling behind Nightcrawler there. That's all replaced. I mean, it's funny, all the stuff that sneaks into shots you don't think about. But it's there, like that tail. And the tail was beautifully designed by the guy who designed the makeup for Batman, for Nightcrawler, and for Mystique. And it, as a practical device, there was a practical tail. And for a normal dialogue scene, he could actually wear it, and it was really convincing the way it moved. It was like a big piece of spring steel, and it just had this wonderful motion that whatever his hip did, this thing would like react to it. And it wasn't a stiff rod or anything. It was fantastic. But he couldn't do the stunts in it. And this is all stunts. And I was quite honored when a good friend of mine who's now passed away, Bill Taylor, pardon me, said, "Mike, which ones of the shots of Nightcrawler are CG?" And I said, "None of them. It's a stunt guy all the way through."
Incredible.
And he said, "You're kidding me." I said, "Yeah, we didn't have time. We had a 16-week post." I said, "We had to shoot it and then figure out how to fix it later." So, we had really very specific previs that we did. I was probably one of the first people to do previs. The first one was on Batman. Batman Returns in 1990 or 91. We did the title sequence, which is the whole sewer sequence where Penguin's parents abandon him in the sewer. It's really a heartwarming family drama. And so he gets into the sewer and starts floating down the thing, and there's like 9 or 10 cuts over 5,000 frames or something like that. And it has bats in there and other stuff. There's a shot, the closing shot of the title where the bats come flying past camera. These are motion blurred bats. And the shot was 1,100 frames long. And, we almost decided to go on vacation, wait for that thing to come out, because we were also going out to film. Films were released on film. And on Batman, quite a few of the shots, because of the memory demands on compositing, we didn't have enough computing power to get done in time. So we were rendering out the object and the mats for an alpha channel for those bats, and we composite them optically, but we generated them digitally because we could do it so much quicker.
That's amazing. Do you ever do anything like that, Hugo, or Nuke always came to the fore for you?
Yeah, yes, it's always like compositing to save it. I was going to ask as well on this sequence, like you already said it was motion control, but this involved a lot of wire work as well. So
A lot of wire work.
Was that also why the reason why the tail had to be digital as well, so it wouldn't be interconnected with the wires as well?
I'm sure that was a complication, but really the concern by the stunt coordinator, Brian Smers, who's just brilliant, and his crew. The guy, by the way, in the makeup is Terry Notary, the guy who is the Planet of the Apes lead motion.
Yeah, like a
coach.
movement coach.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
amazing.
So Terry was Nightcrawler in those scenes, and he was a really good match for Alan Cumming.
But were all the shots in motion control? Just a few, right?
No, just that. In fact, that one and the one tracking sideways where
When
he
he's
busts
like-
through the door,
Yeah.
because we had to carry him through the door, and it's actually double stunts. There's the stunt at the beginning where he jumps, and there's the stunt when he comes through the door on the other side. So, it was shot in pieces, but it's motion control so that we put all the pieces together quickly.
Let's jump forward to Golden Compass. You'll see in this reel that we're showing lots of great work here from Rhythm and Hughes and Frame Store and a few other studios. But Mike, we want to ask you about the ending of the Golden Compass, because that seemed to be one of your big challenges as the film's visual effects supervisor. Obviously, it's the film you won an Oscar for.
Yeah.
But the ending was a real challenge, right?
I can't remember the ending very well. Does that answer your question?
Come on, tell us.
Was it that traumatic?
The end, are you the two shots we forgot? Or are you talking about?
Well, yeah, that's a
that
fun
was
story
truly
too.
the ending.
Maybe share that story first.
We'd been working on the film I'd been on the film for 2 years. And the visual effects producer, Susan McLeod, she's a really good producer. Susan and I were reviewing the first reel of the film, which was the last reel that was finished, and making sure that everything was together before we shipped it off to the lab, and they could start to the colorist, and it gets colored, and then it gets put in the shot. And I had done in Golden Compass, I did all the color grading with Peter Doyle on the film, and the DP had been fired by that point, so he couldn't do the work.
Okay.
And he couldn't do the work. And that's why he got fired, because he couldn't do the work. So he shall remain nameless unless you look him up. And these shots were actually this was all previs until this shot here, where it's a final, because we built a special motion rig for her. But at the end of the film, we discovered by going through the first reel that there were 2 shots in the movie we'd actually forgotten to work on. And
Forgotten to work on.
for a year, those 2 shots had been in the cut, right? And they were some of the first shots we shot, and it was one of the first sequences that got cut, and they were there. And everybody had seen it. I graded the movie with Peter and didn't find them. Susan was constantly combing the film for things we might have lost track of. And we lost track of these 2 shots. And I discovered it 24 hours before the drop dead of when we absolutely had to have everything to the lab or they weren't going to make it to the theaters on time.
Wow.
And I was joking with Peter. Peter did Lord of the Rings. I was joking with Peter and saying, we are so tight. I said, I think we better start lining up the Grummins on the tarmac. and loading them with film because I don't know how else we're going to get this film out to everybody. And then he says, "You mean like this?" And he shows me this photograph from Lord of the Rings of all these private jets lined up in New Zealand or wherever the lab was. It was cranking out the release prints and loading them on there and getting Lord of the Rings out, special delivery. So it's an interesting process making these movies. But it was it was interesting. We got the shots done in 24 hours.
Yeah, and Kent Houston from Peerless sort of saved you.
Kent Houston and Peerless took them on. Kent was helping me with a lot of shots, Kent and his team, that just didn't have a home. He always, when you do this many shots, you wind up with 1,600 shots on the film, 400 of which are on the cutting room floor, but they're finished, and nobody's ever seen them, and Warner Brothers won't show them. And it's the whole dissolution of the North Pole and the cavitation, the crumbling of glaciers and ice and Aurora Borealis going crazy, and it was insane. Rhythm and Hughes worked on it, and they about 100 or 120 shots in just that sequence, and they were starting to deliver finals to me. At that point, I was doing the finaling of all the shots, not the director. And they were starting to deliver the finals. The finals were looking beautiful. And then I got invited in the cutting room, and they had recut the last 45 minutes of the movie and reshuffled everything, and we had to completely rebuild a huge number of shots we'd already finished, and everything else in 5 weeks. We had to kind of like totally take basically everything except those shots in the last reel we had to take over and redo. They took the middle of the movie and put it at the end, and the end of the movie and put it in the middle. But they wanted the locations to be the same as they were. So everything that Lyra, the young girl, did in the middle of the movie, she would do at the end of the movie, and everything she did in the end of the movie, she'd do. So we had to take her out of all the shots that she had been in and replace the backgrounds. But they were made at 2 different facilities because there were 2 different sequences.
Is this why you said you couldn't remember the ending of the movie? Because you don't want to remember the ending of
no, it was just way painful. And it was actually a good decision in terms of storytelling.
Right.
And it was a decision that people contended with in pre-production. And I recommended it in pre-production, that they swap those 2. And they said, no. They finally came back and said, no, we're going to keep it like the book. We have a fan base. We want to make sure they're happy. But it really wasn't working. The first book was not a movie. It was a book. And it's a wonderful book, but it's the first act in a 3-act book series. And each one of those books was an act in one movie and not, all by itself. And then so they got replaced. This is previs we did overnight for shots that were getting invented on a moment-by-moment basis. That's why it looks as crude as it does. And then we had the motion base that we used for the bear. We also used for things like this. All the ropes really wound up being replaced. We knew they would be.
Were they pre-animated, or did you do them on set and then had to adjust to whatever they did on set?
No, they're actually puppeted. We had a Waldo.
Yeah.
You guys know what a Waldo is? It's a dynamic input device with encoders on all the axes, and it was a miniature of the motion base. And so an animator could hold that thing and puppet it. And then as it puppeted, the base would move. And the fellow who was the animation supervisor on the bear, Dottie Einarsson, who's oddly has the same last name as the bar where the bear was living. But Dottie would puppet the Waldo, and the motion would show up in the base. And so it would do sort of what he thought the bear would be doing in those scenes. And then the guys reacted with their ropes as best they could, but we knew we were going to really replace them in the end. And we shot billions of feet of, tartar guards and other stuff. There are some real animals in the movie. There are about 5, maybe, in scattered little shots that were done in post-production, and they wanted me to pick them up, and I refused. I said, "I'm sorry, you can't do that. I'm not equipped to create another animal for you. Thank you."
I love it.
We had 130 bears. We had about the same number of disparate animals, all kinds of everything from little birds and lizards, and people had cockroaches for demons. People in this world had demons, so they had little animals who were their sort of their other, and that was like their id or their ego or both or whatever. I don't know what to call it. And Philip Pullman, who wrote the book, said, "Gee, Mike, it's so interesting because I wrote the book and I had no idea what demons looked like, and I didn't know if you really could see them even. I didn't know what they were." And
that's a great compliment.
We did a bazillion tests in pre-production of different ways of rendering and making them there but not there and other stuff. And I said, "Guys, just make them photoreal. Please, we know how to do photoreal. What you're asking for is an effect that doesn't exist. There's nothing like it." So we went with photoreal.
You did a great job, and obviously it won the VFX Oscar that year, which is amazing. Yeah. Just before we open it up to questions, actually, Hugo is dying to ask you about stuffies, because Hugo is obsessed with stuffies.
Yeah. It's me, yeah. I'm the one with the problem, yes, of course. Limiting me, yeah.
It's actually me, obviously, who's obsessed with them.
We had hundreds of stuffies. They range from inflatable stuffies for the bear. The bear is obviously, as you can tell, is quite large. And on its hind feet, the bear, Yorick, the bear, and Ragnar was even larger. Yorick was about 11 feet tall. So you couldn't carry that around in a truck very easily from one location to the other and one set to the other, and then to get it set up on the set would just take forever. So we borrowed a idea from things that people put up at gas stations to, inflate. And the property guys had bears made out of nylon that were inflatable. And so they'd roll out this little thing and plug it in, and 2 seconds later we had a fully grown bear. It'd go bloop, 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 and it would be this bear on the set. And it was the right size and certainly not the right texture, and that didn't have fur. But we did have a real polar bear fur pelt, which we had to get special licensing to, dispensation from the government, and to actually even have it. But and that shot right there is the one before that is a shot where you see the wolf jumping sideways. I had to do that. It was not the plan. The plan for that shot was to have the bear, if you're going to do an action scene and somebody's struggling to get out of a spot where they're being tied up, then you really want to make sure that you can see their face and you know what's going to go on. Well, the action for that was shot. I wasn't on the set. And we had, in some days at this period of time in the movie, we shot for 34 weeks on that film. And at some period of time in the movie, oh God, I just lost it again. I hate that. So come on, I'll bring it back. I don't know. Oh yeah. Anyway, we had 5-second units working on, and I was directing one of them, and then there were 4 other guys doing 4 others, and then there was first unit shooting. It was just crazy. So we got to that part, and I couldn't be there on that set because I was out with a couple hundred kids and Tartar guards chasing each other around a parking lot. And so they shot it, but they shot it so that the bear has to, by the action, has to turn away from camera. So the bear is tied up and struggling. And so I had to add another shot
Right.
to make up for the struggling shot that we didn't get here. But I also wanted people to pay attention to the fact that that this bear that was turning away from camera and moving away from the center of the lens is the thing they should be looking at. So I borrowed a trick from Vermeer and I put in a wolf. He didn't paint wolves. He painted broomsticks and things. But if you look at his paintings, he directs your eye like spot on. And so I said, we need a wolf to jump with the head and say, look at where the bear is. And so that's what we did.
Brilliant. Well, clearly that's added to the film's flavor, and congratulations again on the Oscar. Hugo, it's time for Q&A, right? So we've got a roving microphone, and as I say, there's a couple of giveaways for some great questions. I think that's the first hand up there at the back. So thanks so much, Lily. And yes, please think of some fun things to ask Mike. There you are.
Oh, wow.
There's the
Who's that?
golden...
This is the still when what on the other side of this shot is a set of bleachers filled with journalist photographers. And after you win the Oscar, you go in the back and you have to go through this little gauntlet of all these things you do, and mostly publicity things for the Academy. And then this is part of it. And then they have these guys and they shout out questions and they take pictures. And so they were taking pictures and I yelled at I was yelling at the guy saying, because it was like picture after picture. And I'm saying, does the word torn rotator cuff have any meaning for you guys? Because you're holding this thing out.
It's quite heavy, yeah. All right, question.
Hi. I've listened to a few episodes of the VFX Notes podcast, so I knew that this talk was going to be great, and it was. Michael, you worked on Blade Runner as a prop supervisor, if I'm not mistaken. And
action prop supervisor was my credit.
Sorry.
I have the pop here. I'll put it up.
So I imagine that you had to realize some of the concepts by Sid Mead, and
yes.
I would like to know how that went and how it was working with him, because I'm a big fan of his work.
Of Sid's?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Who isn't?
They're good. Well, Sid was brought in by Ridley early on, well before I was on the film, to do concept work for the film. And one of the things he drew a concept illustration for was the Voight-Kampff machine. This is it right here, and that's me when I actually had curly black hair. And that bellows on the thing that you said go up and down, I designed that and then built it, because it's not truly a bellows, of course. But what happened was there was a team that had been hired to come in and build the Voight-Kampff machine. And there was an art director assigned to them to tell them what to do. That art director went off the rails a little bit and gave these guys drawings of something Ridley totally removed from anything that looked like that. And it didn't look like anything Sid Mead did. And they built it, and it was an embarrassment. It was absolutely, and I'd been on the show for like 3 days, and I'm not joking. It was Thursday, so I may have started on Monday, so 4 days. And so I got a call, and they said, can you come to a meeting? We got to talk about the Voight-Kampff machine. And I said, what's the Voight-Kampff machine? Because I just started. I didn't know what's going on. So it turned out that it's a very important prop in the movie, and Ridley had seen what these guys did and just lost it and said, this is just crap. I'm not going to put it in a movie. It was, I don't want to get into the details because it isn't important, but it was truly embarrassing. It was, if any of you have a 6-year-old child, they could have done as well, and I'm not exaggerating. It was terrible. They took $40,000 of the production company's money and spent probably a day and a half on it, and it didn't work. So they said, what do we do? And I said, well, let me make a phone call. And I called Mark Stetson, who's a good friend of mine, And Mark was building the miniature shop for Blade Runner. He's putting it together, working for Doug Trumbull and Richard Jurasek. And so I said, Mark, you've got your team, right? He said, well, I got about a dozen guys, men and women, and but I don't have anything to work on yet. We're just planning out how we're putting the shop together. So it's going to be another week or so. And I said, perfect. I want to 4-wall you starting tomorrow morning, because it was about 8 o'clock at night when I called him. Tomorrow morning, I want to 4-wall you until Tuesday morning, around the clock, to get this thing built. And so I brought him the Sid Mead sketches, left all the other art director-driven stuff behind, and brought the terrible prop. And the miniature builders were, as I expected, when they saw the terrible prop, completely energized. It was like, oh my God, that's terrible. We can do so much better. And they did. They're just spectacular. The last two people standing were me and Mark, because you always wind up with the guys who are going to get their heads cut off if it doesn't work, lasting the longest. And I loaded it in the trunk of my car at about 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning and drove to the set. Brought it, plugged it in, showed it to Ridley, and he said, fucking fantastic. And that was it, and we were off and running.
I love it.
And Ridley was, actually, there were a lot of rumors of bad relationships between the crew and Ridley Scott, some of which was true, and much of it not, but enough of it. And the whole process was just really, fraught with problems there. But the two of us just got along great, and it was because of this machine. It just came together. Without Mark's guys, I would have been dead in the water, and I would have looked pretty stupid.
Yeah. Well, let's get to
Great question, and you get a Hugo's Desk course.
Yes,
That's great to hear.
So come up at the end.
Please come over at the end. Okay.
Is that a question just here?
Yep.
Hi, thank you so much for the great talk and actually sharing your experience. But I actually had a question about that because you've been in the industry for so long, you really have seen it grow. So I actually want to ask, is there something you've learned or you've seen throughout the years that still sticks with you through this day?
Yeah, it's something I've learned. Well, I've learned that I'm no longer surprised by how innovative and creative people I work with are. When you have a problem, it's like the arm on the Voight-Kampff machine, that was just a piece of leftover, like a linear rail extension piece that normally had a little stepper motor on the end of it and drove a thing for very precision machinery for building printed circuits and stuff. And the machinist in Mark's shop came up and said, Mike, can you use this? I just love the way it looks. And I said, well, that's the arm on the Voight-Kampff machine. And so that's it. It's there. It's that simple, but also be somebody. There was a fellow who worked for me at Warner Digital who did the railgun effects for a film I worked on called Eraser, where Arnold Schwarzenegger wields these, and the bad guys wield these weapons that leave these particle field remnants as the projectile flies through the air. Completely unnatural and not real anyway. But he was fooling around with particles, and I came in and I said, what are you doing there? And he said, I just think the railgun needs a little bit more. I said, it's brilliant. That's perfect. And I showed it to the director, who was a little reluctant. And I said, this is a gun that nobody else in the world has and is more powerful than any other hand weapon anybody's ever had, and you don't want to make it special? I didn't say it in those words, but that's what. And so he did. And so I think the one thing I've learned is I spend a lot more time listening than talking when I'm at work.
Thank you.
Great question. And come up and see us for a magazine afterwards.
And this, by the way, this Cerebro shot that's playing right now, that idea for me, the inspiration was a German film, by the way, Run, Lola, Run. And so if you look at the beginning of it, you'll see when Lola's running through the crowd in this one long sequence. I was so inspired by that, and so we came up with Cerebro.
Brilliant. Here we go.
Well, first up, thank you for the interview. It was super lovely, especially the Golden Compass, which is one of my favorites. I have a special question. Of all the projects you have done over your time, has there been a certain scene or certain projects that you were passionate about but didn't make the final cut that you want to talk about?
No, the only thing that didn't make the final cut in a major way, that had a major, not just a rig removal or something, was that North Pole sort of demolition of the North Pole, if you can imagine what that might look like. We did. And this stuff, all this alethiometer stuff, is like, that came up like 8 weeks before we had to be done, and it was 103 shots in the movie. Suddenly we had to create digital alethiometers. No, I've not had that experience, actually. I've had, they'll say, Mike, we know it's going to break your heart, but we're not going to do that shot. And I go, yeah, that's fine. Don't worry. This was pretty heartbreaking. We'd worked for well over a year on it and really got it gorgeous. And I haven't seen it since the day they killed it. I don't even know it's in that archive somewhere in Glendale.
I'm going to find it.
Yeah. Thanks for the question. We've got time for one more. Oh, no.
I think he was the.
Okay.
The next
Sorry.
Hi, I've always wanted to ask this question, never had the chance to. There's this one scene in Blade Runner, right before Rick Deckard uses the Voight-Kampff machine to test Rachel. There's this one shot. It's a wide shot. You see the entire table. You see the chairs.
Yes.
And you see Harrison Ford miming, putting out the Voight-Kampff machine onto the table without the prop. I've always wondered, is it because the prop wasn't finished at that point, or...
No, it was because I delivered the Voight-Kampff machine, and then somebody said to me, "Where's the case?" And I said, "We didn't make a case for the Voight-Kampff machine. Nobody asked for a case for the Voight-Kampff machine."
No
and
way.
I just finished this a half an hour ago, and you want to know where the case is? No, I don't have it. And they said, "Can you have it tomorrow?" And I went, "Sure." So then Bill George and I worked that night, and we made a case for it. But the case was too small. But it's all we had time for. We just elaborated on a real existing case and made it look a little more like Blade Runner. And I had pretty good welding skills back then, so I welded a new handle for it. And Bill did some fancy stuff on the outside. We had a lot of fun, and we put it together, and I brought it to the set the next day. But it was too small to close the lid. You could set the Voight-Kampff machine in it, but you couldn't get the lid. And so we had to fake the idea that, it's the same problem as Batman in his car, right? The Batmobile. He couldn't get out of the car or into the car wearing that.
But he's Batman. How can he not get out of the car? He can just grapple hook and go up.
Yeah, he's Batman. Why couldn't he figure that out? So in that case, it was that. I had to come up with a case, and I had 24 hours, and I had not slept for 5 days. So this is what you get.
Wow.
Thanks.
Thanks, and please come up and grab a magazine. Guys, I'm sorry that we have to end it there, but that was such a great collection of questions, and I of course loved hearing Mike's stories. Can you please thank Mike Fink?
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
I just want to say one thing real quickly. I'll be around till tomorrow night, and if some of you see me and realize you did have a question, you weren't able to ask or whatever, didn't have time, just stop me, and we'll chat for a bit. Okay?
Thanks again.
All right. Thank you.